engagement, it is my privilege and honor to warmly welcome each one of you to the fourth session of the Global Connect series webinar, the North America chapter. The Global Connect series serves as a platform that brings together our esteemed alumni and the wider Christ community to exchange knowledge, experiences, and perspectives that inspire students and fellow alumni alike. Through these sessions, we continue to strengthen our global alumni network and foster meaningful connections that transcend geographical boundaries. Today, we are delighted to present a session titled Cultural Adaptation and Professional Life in North America. This webinar aims to provide valuable insights into adapting to a diverse cultural and lifestyle while building a successful professional career in North America. Participants will gain a deeper understanding of workplace expectations, communication styles, cultural intelligence, and strategies for thriving in a global professional environment while staying connected to their identity. North America continues to be one of the world's leading destinations for higher education, innovation, and global career opportunities. It's a multicultural society, and dynamic workplace environments offer immense opportunities for professional growth. But succeeding in such an environment requires much more than technical expertise. It demands cultural awareness, adaptability, and effective communication, and the ability to collaborate across diverse backgrounds. To help us understand better, we are privileged to be joined today by an accomplished Christ alumna who has successfully built an inspiring academic and professional career in the United States. Before we proceed, we would like to take a moment to acknowledge and express our sincere gratitude to the distinguished leaders and members whose vision, guidance, and unwavering support continue to strengthen the alumni community and make initiatives such as these possible. We would like to extend our sincere gratitude to Reverend Dr. Joe C.C., Vice Chancellor, for his continued support and encouragement of the alumni engagement initiatives. We would also like to express our appreciation to Reverend Dr. Biju PD, Pro Vice Chancellor, and Reverend Father Verghese, Chief Finance Officer, Christ Deemed to be University, for their guidance and support in the strengthening of alumni driven initiatives. Our heartfelt thanks goes to Reverend Father Josie George, Director Alumni Chapter, Christ Deemed to be University, for his commitment to fostering meaningful connections among Christites across the globe. We are grateful to Brigadier B.G. Jagdish, Director, Center for Placements, Career Guidance, and the Office of Alumni Engagement, for his leadership and continued support in making initiatives like these possible. We would also like to acknowledge Dr. Rishikesh KB, Associate Director, Institutional Partnerships, Internships, and Alumni Connect, for his guidance and dedicated efforts in organizing today's webinar. A special word of thanks goes to Dr. Finu Mary Jose, Alumni Mentor, North American Chapter, for her continued support and mentorship to the chapter. Finally, we acknowledge the efforts of Ms. Ranju Matthew and Ms. Vinitha Lalu, alumni coordinators whose planning and coordination have been instrumental in the successful organization of this webinar. As we move forward with today's program, it is my honor to invite Dr. Rishikesh KB, Associate Director, Institutional Partnerships, Christ Deemed to be, to deliver the introductory note and formally set the tone for today's webinar.
Thank you, Archita. Well, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome to the session 4 of Global Connect series webinar hosted by the Office of Alumni Engagement. Well, it's often said that crossing a border is easy. Crossing culture is where the real journey begins, because moving to a new country is not merely about adjusting to a different time zone. It is about understanding a lot of other aspects of that country, probably a new way of thinking, new way of communicating, collaborating, or building relationships. Everything differs. And while fortunately, we have our alumni across the globe who have been volunteering to come and share their experience. And today's session is also designed precisely to understand one such journey. And as students and several professionals are increasingly aspiring to build careers across the country, and I think understanding the based on the topic that we have chosen for our discussion today, we'll try to understand the cultural nuances, what is expected in the workplaces, communication styles, professional etiquettes, because I personally believe that success abroad is not determined only by your academic competence or technical competence. It's a lot decided by your ability to connect, your ability to collaborate, and even contribute across cultures. And we are privileged to have one of our proud alumni, Dr. Sharnya Govindaraj, um, the profile of which would be read out later. Therefore, I'll skip that part, but I think her experiences promises us to offer several such nuances and rather practical perspectives that would help us better understand not only how to adapt to a new environment, but also how to grow confidently, because she has done that and she speaks from her experience while staying rooted in one's own values and identity. I encourage everyone to be participative and also thank once again the alumni chapter and Ms. Sharanya Govindaraj for having accepted our invitation and to share um, your thoughts, your insights, your experience with our students, and in fact, not just our students, everyone who has joined for this webinar. Thank you, and it's a pleasure welcoming you on behalf of both the Office of Alumni Engagement and also Christ University. Over to you.
Thank
Thank
you
you so
so
much. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm really sorry. I'll continue. Thank you so much, Dr. Rishikesh, for your insightful words and for laying the perfect foundation for today's session. It is now my privilege to introduce our distinguished speaker for today's session. We are honored to have with us Dr. Sharanya Govindaraj, a distinguished alumna of Christ Deemed to be University, where she completed her bachelor's degree in communication and media studies before pursuing her higher education in the United States. Dr. Govindraj holds both a Master's of Science in Applied Cognition and Neuroscience and a Doctor of Philosophy in Cognition and Neuroscience from the University of Texas at Dallas. She's currently serving as a senior UX researcher at Uber, where she leads user research for enterprise and financial products, helping shape product strategy through data driven insights and human centered research. Over the course of her career, she has worked with organizations including the University of Minnesota, Slack, and Scan, collaborating across product, engineering, and design teams to translate behavioral research into meaningful user experiences and business outcomes. With her interdisciplinary expertise spanning across cognitive psychology, neuroscience, user experience research, and product strategy, along with her experience of living and working in North America, Dr. Govind Raj brings a unique perspective on navigating cultural transitions, adapting to global workspaces, and building a meaningful international career. Today, she will share her experiences and valuable insights on cultural adaptation, professional life in North America, helping the participants understand how they can successfully adapt to new cultures while remaining authentic to their own identities. Without further ado, it is my honor to invite Dr. Govind Raj to address the gathering. Ma'am, the screen is now yours.
Thank you so much for such a warm welcome. Thank you so much to the Alumni chapter for having me. It is my greatest pleasure to be here and talk to fellow Christites. And I'm just going to get my screen sharing started here. Okay, awesome. Um, this topic was particularly very interesting to me because it's a topic that's close to my heart. It's something that I've strived really hard to not just preach, but also live because I believe that we all have a very unique perspective, a very unique background coming from a place that's as culturally rich as India and trying to spread our wings and going abroad, right? So I was really excited to talk a little bit about my experience, but also open up the floor to some questions that anyone might have. And I want to make this as interactive as possible. So I would encourage people to interact in the chat window. We'll just have a couple of questions throughout the webinar today. And if you have any questions on the way, feel free to raise your hand. I think that's an option. So feel free to raise your hand and I can take questions along the way as well. Um, as Arshida introduced me, I was just looking back and I was just, getting a feel of my full journey. And this is something I was thinking about as I was working on this. One piece that usually gets missed is the fact that I was actually a journalist also. So I've worn quite a few hats, I would say, in my professional career. But before that, the foundation for all of this was laid in Bangalore, where I was born and raised. I had the privilege of attending Christ University. Any CEPs in the house today? Anybody else? Nice. Awesome. 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 Yeah, I was in the batch of 2017 and looking at all of your register numbers, I realized that, wow, it's been a while because my register number started with 17. Anyway, I think that really set the stage for cultivating a very multidisciplinary kind of an approach to thinking because I was coming from a science background before that. But I think going into an arts classroom really opened up my mind, opened up my perspective, and set the stage for what was to come in the future. And right after graduating, I started a job at Reuters News as a business journalist. I did that for a little bit before deciding that I wanted to pivot back to psychology because, as you all know, CEP, like the P stands for psychology. I came back to psychology research and I worked as a researcher at the Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts, which is a central government research institution. I worked on very niche cultural topics, such as the intersection of Carnatic classical music and autism, and those kind of really niche, small level experiments, where I was introduced to the idea of scientific inquiry and how to frame research questions, how to frame a research project, etc. And that led me to my next destination, which was to pursue a PhD in cognition and neuroscience. In my PhD, I studied or I conducted research on how caregiver speech influences the way their babies learn language. So, like how parental speech has a direct impact on language learning in babies. And I want to call out like one little nuance here. So, most of the research in psychology in the Western world is very heavily Caucasian or based on white populations. But me being a person of color, I wanted to bring that perspective into my research. And what I did is I recruited participants, or rather, I designed a study to study or to rather explore how babies in bilingual households learn language, right? Because most of the language learning studies are about monolingual English speaking babies. But of course, I think all of us on this call, I think I can confidently say, can speak at least two languages, right? So I wanted to know how that influences language learning in babies. So that was my dissertation about like bilingual families and how such babies learn language. So anyway, right, all of this was not a very linear transition. I would say it took me a while to figure out exactly what I wanted to do and how I wanted to get there. Um, but ultimately, I knew that I wanted to be in a space where I can bring all of my skills together. So I had this communications, media, and journalism background, right? But I also had this deep expertise in behavioral research now because what a PhD taught me to do is not just the subject of my dissertation, but just generally how to conduct good, rigorous behavioral research. So, on one side, I had developed these research skills, and on the other was my storytelling and source identification and all of that from the journalism side, right? Like the inherent curiosity that a journalist has. So, I wanted to bring all of this together. And I wanted to be in a space where my work and the impact of my work is visible in the near term and not really, like I didn't really want to wait around for like a year or so to publish something, which is typically the case in academia, right? So a good balance for me to bring my skill sets and also uh, what I felt would be a fulfilling career for my personality was tech and the world of user experience research. For those of you who might not be familiar, UX research is a study of how people interact with products and improving that experience by conducting behavioral research. So, to explore this world in a new country, so think about it. I was in Christ until 2017. I got a degree in CEP. I was a writer's journalist in Bangalore. And then I was doing this whole culture research thing and then moved to the US. So I've basically pivoted my career twice. So in that third pivot, I wanted to pursue UX. And I started that by doing an internship in this company called Cruise. Cruise was a company that made self-driving cars. I can never forget the first ride that I took in a Cruise car. It was insane because I called the car on my phone. It came in, like one of the streets in San Francisco, picked me up, dropped me in some other place, and there's nobody driving the car. It was crazy. Like the steering is turning on its own, and it's like turning on the turn signals, indicators, everything. It was surreal. But that internship paved the way for me to get a foot in the door in big tech. And I landed at Slack, which I think some of you might have used. Slack is a communication tool which is very beloved in business spaces. And I was working with very niche, like B2B, business to business type of audiences at Slack. And then I switched gears a little bit and joined this small company called Scan Health Plan, which is in the business of health insurance. So health insurance for senior adults, so like adults aged 65 plus. It's a very niche audience again. So I got to conduct a lot of research with senior adults, and it really unlocked a new level of empathy for me because these folks were really struggling with technology, but technology is evolving at very fast speeds, faster than they can catch up. So that was my time at Scan. And right now I'm at Uber and I work on financial products and payment experiences and those kind of things. If I think some of you might have used Uber, so I work on the experience that you see when you're trying to book a cab and when you're seeing like different prices, how those prices dynamically change, how that's presented to you, how offers are presented to you, all of that stuff is kind of my area right now at Uber. So as you can see, this is not a straightforward path by any means. And I think there were some skills along the way that I was able to pick up that really helped build this kind of a profile. And I think the biggest one of them was the art of unlearning, right? So if I think about this whole journey, if I have to put it in one word, I would say it was overwhelming, right? Like Dr. Grishikesh was saying in the beginning, it's not just about like moving, like booking a flight and crossing a border, right? It's about, okay, what do you do after you cross the actual freaking border? Because You're there for a reason. You're trying to do something that perhaps nobody in your family has done. I'm a first generation grad school graduate from my family, so it was like changing careers, moving continents, and adapting to this whole new thing taught me that it's exactly, I think, I'm not sure who exactly mentioned it in the intro, but it's like getting a degree is just the beginning of it, but then surviving it and later thriving is the bigger challenge. And I think the biggest part of all of this is adaptability, the ability to have an open mind and to accept whatever comes your way and then adapt accordingly. And some of the ways in which I did that and continue to do it is to unlearn the rules, especially after working in India and after getting like an undergrad degree in India. I realized that the first thing I had to do was forget a lot of the things, because the same things that might make you successful in one environment might not be the same in another environment. So making those judgment calls every single day of your life and trying to figure out, is this the right way to do it? Is this going to be accepted? Is this how this culture works? Right. So like unlearning those rules so that I can embrace the beginner mindset. So I strongly believe that every day is day one. So if you approach anything with this mindset, you are naturally going to be open to asking more questions, staying curious, not just being curious in the beginning and then getting complacent. No, like staying curious throughout the process and being open to the fact that you might be wrong about something and that you might have to learn this new skill and that you might have to, like, grow out of your own cocoon in order to be able to spread your wings a little bit. And I think one of the things that one of the buzzwords that I'm seeing a lot on like LinkedIn, wherever, everywhere now is transferable skills, right? I think it's really important to identify which skill is truly transferable versus which is not. It's not that every skill is transferable. I think, especially like when I was trying to pivot to tech from my neuroscience PhD, right? Everybody is telling me, oh, your skills are very transferable. You've done like a 4-year PhD degree, you're a doctor, blah, blah. Okay. But in my PhD, I was used to writing a research paper for like 3 months, 6 months, run an experiment for 6 months. But right now at work, I'm running projects which are like 2 weeks from planning to delivery. And I'm seeing the impact of that work like 2 months from then, right? So transferability is one thing, but you need to be really a good judge of which of these skills are truly transferable. And I think that's something that will come with time and with networking. I've spoken for a bit now, so I'd encourage the audience to get your hands busy on the keyboard because it's activity time. You'll see a bunch of these during the rest of the session as well. So open the chat and type in the first word that comes to mind when you hear the phrase living abroad, right? But don't hit send. I'll give you all like maybe 20 seconds to think about it and give you a countdown. And at 3 to 1, go ahead and hit send. I'd love to know what is the first thing that comes to mind when people think about living abroad. Love it. Keep it coming. AQI. Oh my God. Okay. Oh, yes. Better quality of life, making it. Overwhelming, scary adaptation, different experiences in life, cultural shock, uncertainty, better UXR market, whoever said that. ROI, okay, different mindsets and attitudes. Homesickness, yes, 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 yes. Traveling, education. Wonderful. I'm so glad that you're also aware because I was really not aware of all of this when I was at your level, when I was still in undergrad or when I was just out of like bachelor's. To be honest, I didn't know a lot of these things that I was signing up for, I had no idea because just one quick anecdote before I move on to the next part of this, right? I landed in this country on December 24th, 2020. Hindsight, very stupid decision because everything is closed on Christmas Eve. Who knew? For me, like Christmas Eve was like, oh, Christmas Eve, I'm just gonna go. I'm gonna look at like pretty Christmas trees, right? What I didn't realize was every damn thing is closed. So all that was open was like a gas station, petrol station, 7-Eleven. I think you would have heard of a 7-Eleven. Ended up eating some really dumb pizza for my first meal in the country. But yeah, right? Things that don't really strike you. But yeah, all of these things are very real. All of the things that you're all feeling, very, very real. Scary, overwhelming. Homesickness is something that you can, I mean, that I can, I still haven't ever, I don't think I'll get over it. It's been more than 6 years now. I think you just get better at boxing it and storing it somewhere safely in your brain. Um, but yeah, great thoughts. So, how did this transition actually work for me in my case, right? That initial move. Obviously, I think someone mentioned cultural shock. Exactly the case. The logistics and infrastructure, right? This one hit like really hard because some things are really easy, are like much, much better. AQI, systems, customer service, and everything, right? But you will not believe it that when I came to Dallas, the first thing that I noticed was how much of a car economy it is. Like every single person has a car. And I didn't have a car. I couldn't afford a car. What the heck? I was there as a student and I was just starting off as a PhD. Like it was my first semester, whatever, right? Public transit was like really, really bad outside of the main business district areas. So, like in the suburban areas, this is a problem across the US. Public transportation is really bad. And this was a big cultural shock for me because the public transit is so freaking good in Bangalore. And you have like autos, cabs, buses. I had my own like scooty and everything, right? So I came here and I felt very handicapped because I was like, oh, geez, okay, even if I have to get to a Walmart to buy milk, I have to take a bus and I have to like plan ahead because there are only like 10 buses which go to Walmart in a day, right? So like navigating all of that, trying to open a bank account, all of that stuff was really like a big shock in the face because I thought, oh, US, developed country, it's going to have like public transit. Yeah, in some places, but not everywhere. The second thing was the shift in communication, right? The communication styles are very, very different, both in academic settings as well as in the workplace. I think in India, it's very much more like you have a lot of context when you're having these conversations, but here it's very low context. Now, this might seem like a very, a very, I don't know, utopian kind of a concept. But that was the first thing that hit me here. Like people here don't expect you to know things off the bat when you're having a conversation. But I felt that very strongly when I was in India, where everybody has very similar context. So you're kind of already starting at the same starting line. But here you're all starting at different starting lines because you have like different educational backgrounds, different language backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds. So it's like, okay, the conversation style changes and the communication style really shifts to to a setting where nobody expects you to know things like right in the beginning, but it's more open-ended and it's more like interactive and it's low context, right? And adjusting to like different climatic conditions. Obviously, like coming from Bangalore, I was born and raised, lived there 25 years of my life in beautiful weather, 6 a.m. sunrise, 6 p.m. sunset throughout the year. And I come here and then suddenly the sun is setting at 4 p.m. No, my brain switched off and it's like, no, cannot do this because at 4 p.m. it's dark outside. Like, what what does that mean? How am I supposed to adjust to this whole thing? And then there's this whole daylight savings thing, which is a whole other, yeah. right? So adjusting to small things like everyday, I mean, adjusting to what might seem like small things, right? Like everyday commute, going to college, or like getting groceries, going to meet a friend, going to a restaurant, or trying to plan ahead in the summer when temperatures hit like 40 plus and you don't have a car, right? And you're like walking in the sun to go get a bus. So all of this was simply put like a big exercise in character building because I was coming from a very big cushion in a place like India where I was born and raised. And I was coming to this new place. And not only did I have to adapt to learning because I was here to get a degree, but I was also adapting to these kind of like changes which nobody thinks about before coming here, right? And the power of networking is like so important. I started reaching out to more people, trying to understand like, okay, this is what I am, expected to do, or this is how people are expected to communicate in an academic environment, etc. So, what were some of the key points or key differences in academia that I noticed? One is that participation is the people or like students are expected to speak up, to debate ideas, and a lot of the activities or like a lot of the learning happens through interaction in the classroom. And to be very honest, being in an arts class in a place like Christ was already a very good stepping stone for something like this. But it is even more casual and even more the norm in at least the US. Or I've heard from even like my other friends who've gone to other universities, but that's what I've heard is that participation is a very big key. And it is actually expected and completely acceptable for you to challenge authority. Like no one's going to bat an eyelid if you disagree with the professor when they're saying something in the class, provided you have data to back up what you're saying, right? I'm not saying like you can just have an opinion without backing it up with data, but that is really encouraged and people actually change their mind if you are supporting your claims well, right? Like that's the whole point. And even with like my professor, I still call my PhD professor by her first name. There is, they immediately remove the whole power dynamic by calling someone by their first name. And I think that really made me feel so much more comfortable in getting over my initial inhibitions that I had about myself, right? Like I was coming from India, my accent sounds so different from what they're talking. Half the time they cannot understand what I'm saying. I cannot understand what they're saying, no matter how many American Hollywood movies I've watched, how many shows I've watched. Everything goes out the window if you're in like a meeting room with five other people with a different accent, right? So I think that flattening of the hierarchy was something that really that stood out to me as a very big positive. And even during things like office hours, the interactions are very casual. You can just walk up to any professor and get whatever information you need, right? So learning is encouraged in a different way, which I really, really appreciated about my experience here. So academics aside, let's talk a little bit more about the workplace and understanding US corporate culture, right? It's time for another activity. So let's assume that your manager suggests a project approach in a team meeting. Now, let's say you all graduated, you're in your job, right? Based on your expertise, you know that this approach that they're suggesting will likely fail or cause severe delays. What do you do? Option A, stay quiet in the meeting and DM them privately later. Option B, speak up immediately in front of everyone and directly explain why it's a bad idea. And option C, ask a probing question in the meeting, like, have you considered the impact of doing this or impact on XYZ if we take this approach? Nice, I'm seeing the responses. Keep it coming. Can I get any volunteers who can walk me through like how you're thinking about this? Feel free to unmute and go. Yes, go for it.
So I believe that option C, which is ask a probing question, is gonna be one of the important answers that can be taken forward, because like in the first option, if you see, you stay quiet and DM them privately later. So like that is, firstly I would say staying quiet could be one thing, but DMing is, I would say, it's very unprofessional and informal, even if the workplace culture is very diversely different from the one that's here in India. Second one, I would say, is more confrontational rather than a collaborative approach, because what people tend to look forward towards workplaces is an approach where everyone is working together. Teamwork is very much promoted. Second one sort of brings it like not no consideration, just directly answering and probing the question on a person. However, if we see the third option, it's like you are not confronting the person, but rather you are taking a different approach of how you can place your point while keeping in your mind the point that has been placed in front of the person in front of you, so that there is a dynamic sort of collaboration that is beneficial and inclusive of everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much for walking me through your thoughts so eloquently. I think I agree with the option C, um, making it a little bit more collaborative. I think that's the right way to put it. But um, yes, yes, I see that. I think over time, what I have developed, especially, and I'll preface this by saying that it really depends on your manager, your relationship with your manager, how long you've been in the team, how well you know them, and everything. But what I have found is especially in a place like Slack, which is also pretty big, but Uber is like really, really big, right? Almost everybody takes the approach of option B, where they openly disagree and openly explain why it's a bad idea. And that is something I have not fully unlocked yet. I don't feel confident enough to do so yet, especially in meetings where most of them are perhaps Americans, right? But I've seen that and I've started to develop that trait a little bit more in myself, because what it's actually doing is it's actually putting the responsibility on you as to explaining why it's a bad idea, right? You need to have a solid data backed reasoning. You can't just say, I don't like you as a person, so I don't like your ideas. No, that's not the thing. But you need to have a really solid understanding of the product space. Like, for example, I was telling you that right now my area of expertise in Uber is like your payment experience, financial stuff, right? So my manager heads a team of people who have different areas of expertise, such as myself. So even if she does have an opinion about financial products, which is my area, she encourages me to disagree with her and say, hey, you can tell me if I'm wrong. You can tell me if I'm like speaking BS, and we can figure out like what a better approach is, right? So I was exactly taking the approach of C like all the time because I feel like that's a good balance as well. But off late, I started realizing that everybody around me takes option B. So why shouldn't I? Like, why should I be the only person who's just holding back because I have this whole construct in my head about how I should not speak a certain way? But why not, right? Like, why not be like the other people around? Because if that's what it takes to like make a mark, so be it, right? Again, this is not like a one size fits all. This is not like there's no right or wrong answer here. But I was just hoping to bring that experience here and say, like, I used to think this way, but I think I've started thinking in a different way. And only time will tell if it's a good or a bad thing. But yeah, I just want to surface this with this audience today. And I have worked for a shorter while in India than I have here. But one thing that I found in India was it was a very hierarchical kind of structure, which I think you all might have been expecting to hear today. Right? There's some clear line of authority, like top-down approaches to things, top-down decision making. But I've found that at least in the companies that I've worked here, it's a little bit more flat, the hierarchy. There's a lot more focus on autonomy and self-reliance. So if you see the underlying theme here is actually it might on the outset it might feel like, oh wow, it's nice that you can just focus on yourself. You kind of get to state your opinions, you make the decisions and everything. But they're actually putting a lot more responsibility on you in this way because you are completely responsible end to end for whatever you're doing, right? You cannot say, oh, my manager told me to do so, so like this is what happened. That does happen sometimes, but then most of the times, otherwise, you're like, you are responsible for all the decisions that you make. You are responsible for your successes, all your failures. And I think the whole culture works that way here. Like if you don't get where you want to be, then it's completely on you because you have all the resources to get there. You have all the external support, but the responsibility kind of falls on you ultimately. So, what are some actionable learnings to thrive in corporate America? Firstly, advocate for yourself. Like you have to shamelessly promote yourself, shamelessly talk about your successes, and also be brave enough to accept your failures in the same public environment, right? Like claim ownership, whether it's of success or failure. And I think one thing that I learned was to like reframe this idea of networking. Initially, like networking feels, or at least for me, I'm not a very extroverted person. So it feels very uncomfortable to like reach out to people and be like, hey, hi, I'm trying to do this thing that you did 10 years ago. Can you give me advice on how to do it? Right. So that was very hard for me in the beginning. But I think over time, I started seeing it as an opportunity to actually build relationships rather than like a one-time thing. Right. So I think even now, I have a couple of my mentors in UX research because again, I went from academia to like tech. So I have a few mentors who I would reach out in a heartbeat and they will respond to me. Like we have a true relationship, right? Like I send them gifts for Thanksgiving, Christmas, and everything. They do the same for me. So building those relationships, I think, is very important. One, because you learn so much implicitly, like learn so much about communication and the culture from them, but you're also learning about um, how you can build a career in a certain way. Because to be honest, the kind of career trajectory I've had scares me a lot now that I think back. A lot of things had to fall in place, and I also had to get lucky in many of these situations to get to where I am today. Along with, of course, like working hard, like there is no tomorrow. I think that comes kind of inbuilt for us Indians. That's what I'm seeing around me as well. Like so hardworking, and very smart, right? So all of that is there, but then you also need a little bit of luck sprinkled here and there. But I think throughout that process, if I look back, I'm like, what the heck was I doing? What was I thinking? Thankfully, everything fell in place. But I think having a solid network actually helped me make those decisions along the way. And one more thing that is a big learning for me is that you can clearly connect your effort to your success, right? You can develop metrics that you can track, which will tie directly into your results, which is very measurable. Instead of like simply looking at, oh, I worked for 8 hours today, nobody cares whether you worked 8 hours. All they care about is whether you delivered on what you said you would deliver. Like my parents visited me last year in the US, and they were like, can you just go to office like whenever? Do you not have to like go in and log in at 9 a.m.? Do you not have to like punch out at 5 p.m.? I was like, no, nobody really cares. All they care about is that you do the work, right? So all of these are things that I now feel I have understood, but getting to this point really took a lot of like reframing your mind and opening up your mind to possibilities, unlearning and relearning. Right. So, okay, we spoke about academics, we spoke about corporate life, but what is the one thing that's common here? The work that you have to do on yourself, right? I think this section of the webinar is something that's really close to my heart. How do you adapt to a new culture without losing yourself, without losing or giving up on who you are? Activity time again. Identify your superpower. right? Knowing what you know now, either by listening to me or by just your experience with social media, I think everybody has access to information now. That's not a barrier. What would you say is one soft skill that you've developed during your time at Christ University or other professional engagements that can potentially turn into your superpower abroad? And I want you to think really wide here. It can be something as simple as I can cook a meal in 15 minutes. It's unbelievable how important that skill is when you're living alone, right? So it can be any such skill, or it can even be like a soft skill, like I learned how to write emails really well. Don't give me chat GPT, please. That's not an acceptable answer. But yeah, go for it. Drop in the chat what you think is your superpower, or you can even unmute and speak. And there's no judgment. There is no judging whatever your superpower might be. So go for it. Time management and being punctual, very, very good skill to have. I would say I don't have that. So definitely not my superpower. Adaptability and speaking out my opinions, being open-minded, problem solving, flexibility to understand different people. Yes. Yep. I'd encourage you all to like also look at the other responses that are coming in the chat. Public speaking, yes, very, very important skill. I can go anywhere without the fear of embarrassment. I love that. Does anyone want to expand? I don't want to call on anybody, but some of these responses are really very thought-provoking. So do you mind like explaining, or if you have any examples from your life that you don't mind sharing? Okay, last call. Anybody wants to unmute? I don't want to call on names, guys. Come on. Come on, go. If you haven't spoken already, go for it. Learning to live alone. Yes, very, very important. Okay.
Okay, so hi. I typed in public speaking.
Hmm.
So mostly I consider it as strength because initially when I came to college or like when I was in my pre-uni, uh, I used to stutter while speaking or like while presenting stuff. So what happened is I just started taking up like presentations more and more and like presenting more. And also after coming to Christ, I joined some clubs like in caps and all that, period and all that. So while doing so, I initially developed public speaking as a trait where right now, so I usually do it like out of will rather than compulsion. And also more like you give me any topic, I can speak on it even though I don't know the topic.
Nice. That's really nice. Thank you so much for sharing. I think it takes some bit of courage to talk about, like, something that was a weakness that then became a strength. I like how you said you can speak on any topic now, even if you don't know anything about the topic. I feel very similarly. I think one thing that really helped develop this skill, because a lot of research, a lot of UX research is actually telling a story. So was journalism. So you need to really know how to speak to an audience, hold them, like hold their attention. One thing that really helped was being in street theater. When I was in Christ, I was in street theater. Hi, Pinu ma'am, you're on the call. Tweet. She was also like one of the CSA directors when I was there, Center for Social Action. I used to lead Drishti, the street theater wing of CSA, right? Loved being a part of Drishti, and I think that was single-handedly one experience that just took away all my inhibition. And I can speak in front of really big crowds now without caring about what they think about me because of that experience. So don't underestimate the power of doing something really simple, but being very loud about it. Because that's what we were in Drishti. We were doing really simple plays, but we were loud as heck and we were screaming all the time. But I think that really, really helped. Um, awesome. So, in that context, right, overcoming imposter syndrome was something that was really hard for me to do. Imposter syndrome is this feeling of like not belonging or feeling that you don't deserve what you're getting because you're not really talented. And that constant feeling of, oh, I'm actually kind of a fraud. I somehow made it until now, but someone's going to like, catch me in the act or something like that. But just acknowledging that feeling of like being out of place it's just a part and parcel of transitioning from across one part of the planet to another. It's not a reflection of your true competence. And even after getting a PhD, I still feel imposter syndrome when I think about the topics associated with that, right? I mean, I spent 4 or 5 years digging deep into it, but I'm still like, no, I don't really know much, right? I somehow passed. Um, and also really remembering that your background is actually a strength, and whatever experiences you've gained so far, even if it's coming from a different culture, even if you have like language barriers, and even if your language or your grip over language is not very strong or whatever it is, right? All of that is fine as long as you bring your true self to your work or to your grad school every day, right? Remember that you are an asset in the very form that you are right now, and it can only continue to grow in a positive way. And this was something I still am learning, like giving yourself grace. Adapting into a new culture, adapting into a new setting is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It can get very exhausting very quickly if you don't treat it like a marathon. Like I was initially celebrating very small things like presenting to my lab mates in a meeting, right? And then I was really happy once when I stood up to a lab mate when they were just talking something which was not right. And then now when I'm presenting to like executives who make really big decisions, product decisions at Uber, I feel that's another level of victory that I've unlocked, right? Even if I influence like one person to change their decision, it's something that I've done out of my effort. So like give yourself grace, give yourself a lot of like positive reinforcement, a lot of pep talks. It never gets old. And no matter how where you get in life, I think it's really helpful to just give yourself that grace. And I think this is like the last section of today's webinar. Staying grounded to your reality, right? And I chose these words very carefully: navigating integration without assimilation. Assimilation is adapting to a culture to the point where you become like a native and that you're no longer like an adapter, right? I believe that integration is more important than assimilation because we don't want to lose ourselves. So, like maintaining your core identity is very, very important. The balance of like these two cultures, because you want to feel like you are a good fit for this new culture, but you also want to be proud about the core that you are, where you were born, where you were raised, and that that really defines your identity in so many ways, right? So like the balance is really important to achieve, and finding a community not just of people from your culture, but of people from the local culture can be a very nice experience. It builds your support system in um, very diverse ways, right? Like you start adapting to this culture much better, but you're also staying true to your roots by catching up with people who come from similar backgrounds. So, in a way, your network grows in all different directions. And recognize that some types of stresses are actually a very good catalyst. It actually makes you think, it opens up your mind, it opens up the ability to overcome these challenges, which finally leads to a lot of profound personal transformation. And I can very confidently say that if I hadn't done all of those difficult things, I would not have been the person that I am today. And I think it has forever changed the way that I think about life, the way that I think about my career, and the way I think about myself. Because if I could do all of this on my own, then there is nothing that can stop me from doing whatever else I want to do, right? So, for the last question of the day, what would you say keeps you grounded? What is one Indian habit, tradition, or comfort that you would absolutely refuse to give up, no matter where you move to? To give you an example, it's my love for Bangalore style masala dosa. In fact, like I have a big group of friends who we still jam on like making dosa batter. You will not believe like a bunch of 20 somethings getting on a call to discuss what kind of dosa batter did you make? How did you ferment it? Because I want that exact Bangalore style masala dosa, and listening to classical music, right? So go, go crazy in the chat. What do you think is that one thing that you can absolutely never give up, no matter which part of the world you are in? What is something that means so much? Hmm. You know what I started doing for that? I have a bunch of voice notes from her, from my mom, explaining exactly how to make all the recipes. And it's a little frustrating because she says, put a handful of cashew. I'm like, what is a handful of cashew? Can you tell me like a number? Put a little bit of salt. I don't know what a little bit of salt means. So, yeah, a recipe book from my mom in form of like WhatsApp voice notes is something that I have. Go on, there should be more than this. Come on. It might be hard to imagine, to be honest, like if you haven't really like had to live outside of India. But if you had to think about it in a different way, perhaps, like what is one part of your identity that you really attribute to being Indian, right? Like, of course, you might love what is that Korean band BTS, but that's just a consequence of having access to information, right? But what is it about being an Indian, or what is that habit that you would attribute to being an Indian that you might not be willing to give up? Cooking more instead of eating out. I love how we're talking about food. It's so important, right? Society where people talk to each other like relatives rather than clients. Yeah, I really miss that. I think it's called a collectivist culture, right? So the US is more individualist and Asian cultures are more collectivist. Definitely miss having a village of my own, which when I was growing up was simply my neighbors, simply people around me. Everybody just happened to be a part of my village, right? Listening to religious songs, yes. Okay, any final thoughts? I want to end by saying, Mumbai street food. Yes, yes, yes. I'm glad that you're all starting to think about this right now because these were not things I ever thought about. So to end this, you don't have to choose between fitting in and being yourself. True adaptation is expanding your cultural vocabulary and not erasing your native tongue. That's the difference I was talking about, between integrating somewhere and assimilating. So thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate all of the interaction on the chat. I think that made it very easy for me to, um, talk through this whole thing. And yes, opening up the floor to questions. I thought I saw a hand up. Please feel free to unmute and ask any questions you might have. No question is silly. No question is anything. I'm open to answering anything. You can ask me anything about my experience, anything. Happy to answer. Go for it, Suhani.
Good evening, ma'am. It was great listening to everything that you've said, and you've kind of answered almost all the questions that I had. But then one question I had is like how to make friends who are from different cultures. Because I've seen that a lot of time people they end up making Indian friends and it kind of becomes a comfort zone, and so they don't have friends from other culture. And then there are people who are like, okay, I'm not going to make any Indian friend so that I can have people from other cultures. So like how to balance that, and also like in a way that we don't look desperate also, that okay we want to have a big connection group or something like that. So how to do that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think I whatever you said resonated with me because I'm not from an engineering background, right? But so many of my friends are. And by default, I think masters in engineering, you tend to find like a lot of Indian people. Just end up making friends with Indians. But for me, how it worked is I was in a psychology department, neuroscience program, very few Indians. I think there were two or three Indians in the whole cohort of like, how many people were in my cohort? About like 40, 50 students, PhD students who started with me, two or three Indians. So I didn't have a choice. So grad school was my way to make friends who were from a different culture. And it was really, really fun to make friends with them because, first of all, you're like working with them. And uh, like the PhD culture is very much like you work in a lab and you make, like you have a mentor, you are running experiments. All of you in the lab have different roles and everything. So I started making friends with people in my lab first because we just spent so much time together. And then there was another like sister concern lab, and I started making friends with people there. And then generally in my cohort, we used to take classes together, and I made some really good friends in the beginning who were like my cultural translators. I remember one very specific thing. I was trying to ask a professor, how many marks is this exam for? That's a straightforward question to ask in India, right? How many marks? What is this like a 2 mark question, 3 mark question? How many marks are you going to give me for this? The professor had no idea what I was talking about. And then this one girl who I've never met chimed in and she was like, oh, she means like how many points per question, right? And I was like, oh my God, I didn't know I was supposed to say points. And that girl is still my friend today. So it just like some of these folks were so empathetic that I was coming from a different culture, but they never made me feel like I was inferior to them, right? So I think grad school is one of the best avenues to make friends from different cultures, but you definitely have to be intentional about it. And I think respect goes both ways. Yeah, I think grad school and just trying to make sure that you're reaching out to people, one, who are in similar situations such as yourself, like first year of PhD, taking the same classes, or two, who are in a career that you want to be in, right? I think these two types of friends are going to be like really, really helpful. Next question. Yes,
Thank you so
Archita.
much.
Yeah,
Thank
no
you.
problem.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such a wonderful session. It was very
Please
informative.
don't say ma'am, by the way. Please don't say ma'am. Makes me feel really old, but please go ahead.
Okay. So you started the session talking about the art of unlearning and the beginner's mindset. And then you ended the webinar with the imposter syndrome. I wanted to know that you mentioned many times during the webinar that even after living there after a long period of time, there are still times where you feel like, oh, you miss your home, or there are times where you feel like you don't fit in. My question is like, as a student, like an undergrad student, as we are, and we might be planning our careers abroad, what is that one advice you would give to all of us who are planning to move forward? Because you have been in that position and you are living there. So what would you like put forward to them? Like any thought?
Yeah, I think one thing is never lose confidence in yourself. It's okay to question what you're doing. It's okay to take a step back and be like, you know what, maybe this is not the right thing for me. Maybe I should rethink this in a different way. But never lose confidence in yourself, no matter what. And right now, I think many of you might have heard that there's like this whole recession going on. Companies are laying off people left, right, center, right? It's become really hard to get jobs right now. Um, and it's very easy to start thinking that, oh my God, I think I must suck at this. And that's probably like why I'm not getting a job. Or, those kind of negative self thoughts start creeping in very easily, especially when you're in a difficult situation abroad without without your village supporting you. I think it's very important to not lose confidence no matter what, because one thing that never wavered in me this whole time was the fact that I was capable of something. Like I strongly believed that I could be successful, even if I was not being successful on that one particular day or in that one particular meeting. So I would say, like, develop that strong sense of confidence within yourself. And I think that comes by knowing your strengths and weaknesses really well. Like, I think it's difficult to do it when you're still an undergrad, but as you're growing in your career, you will start understanding, okay, these are things that I can do really well. These are things that I am still learning how to do, and these are things I can never do well. Just having that understanding gives you the confidence to approach life in a different manner. And I think that would be like my one piece of advice is to never lose confidence in yourself and strongly believe that you can do something. I think one of you said, like, when I asked what is the first thing that comes to mind when I say living abroad, making it, right? What is that definition of making it for you? What would mean that you have made it? For me, I thought getting my first internship would be that I've made it. Getting a PhD would be that I've made it. But today, if you ask me, it's going to be like, am I happy at the end of the day? I will feel like, okay, I made it then, right? So that keeps changing. But I think, yeah, one thing that shouldn't change is the confidence and the belief that you have in yourself, that you can do it, that you can do whatever you set your mind to.
Thank you so much. That's actually a very good piece of advice that I think will help like a lot of us who are attending this webinar forward. We have a question in the chat box by Reet, who is a fourth year psychology honors, and she's doing an
Mm-hmm.
internship, and she has a similar CP background as yours, and she would also like to know the intersection of how, like, in the field and how she can build a career forward.
Yes, I would be available for a mentoring session. Yes, I can email anybody on this call. Feel free to email me. I will drop my email in chat. But you can also find me on LinkedIn. Um, my email is very simple, Sharnya Govindaraj at gmail.com. My first name, last name at gmail.com. Note my spelling. It's a weird way to spell Sharanya. Um, Happy to get on calls with Christites anytime. I mean, we'll have like obvious time zone differences, but we can definitely make some time and make it work. I'm happy to chat separately, Reet, because I feel like it's a very nuanced question and might um, be better served one to one rather than in this setting. But I'm more than happy to help support whatever questions you have or whatever thoughts you have.
Thank you
Um,
so much. That would be actually really helpful. And I
yeah,
shall
no
make it.
problem. No
Thank
Just
problem. I
one
you.
quick
was,
question here.
yeah,
I'm
sure.
Rishikesh, this side, yeah. So I think post-COVID, this remote work has actually blurred the geographical boundaries. And do you really think today, I'm also asking this in the context that a lot of international universities are coming to India. In Bangalore itself, I think we have UNSW has already started their campus, and one more is coming. Two other has come to. I mean, that's in the higher education context. But in terms of
Mhm.
work, do you really think that the physical relocation abroad will remain as important for career growth over the next decade when there are possibilities of remote and hybrid mode of working?
Yeah, that is such a fantastic question. And that's one that I've started to think a lot more about, especially after I started at Uber, because in my team right now, I have colleagues who are in Bangalore, Mumbai, Amsterdam, Brazil, and San Francisco. So I think it's truly like what you say is a very good point. Like borders are no longer solid, they're definitely blurry. I think in the next decade or so, there is a lot of scope for extremely valuable and extremely fulfilling career opportunities in India, depending on the product space. Because I think some products which are homegrown are definitely very tough competitors to many of the products abroad, right? But I think when it comes to core tech, um, somehow it does happen that many of these big companies which have big products or services are headquartered in the US or Canada or like sometimes China, South Korea as well. I think working in the HQ areas is definitely more eye-opening. Um, After having worked in India, after coming here, I feel like the decision makers sit here and it's easier to get access to them, easier to communicate with them. So I think that experience is something that is still valuable by moving abroad. But is that the only way to develop a good, fulfilling like career and be successful? Absolutely not. In fact, I am looking forward to the time when I'm going to be relocating back to India because I do want to come back and continue to build my career there. And the reason that it's even possible now is because of how much like the startup culture has grown and how much people are innovating and how much new technology and new products are coming up indigenously, right? So I think we are eventually evolving to the space where people are moving abroad just to get the experience and then moving back to India. In fact, like our very good friends are actually moving to India today because they're starting a business of their own back in India because they got the experience that I wanted here, but the ultimate goal was to go back. I think that is the one common trend that I'm seeing among all of the people here. This is just a stepping stone to the final destination, which is back home in India. So I think that is a mindset that's again been enabled by these borders becoming very blurry and by the fact that you can make really positive contributions to society no matter where you are, right? So this experience is invaluable in the sense that you are in the core of tech, if that's where you want to be, right? If you're in like the heart of it, and that experience is something that's very valuable when you bring it back to your home context. So I think the trend is definitely evolving where people are no longer interested in settling here, but they're looking at this as a stepping stone to get that global exposure and come back and be a differentiator among all of their peers.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking. Tritika?
Yes, ma'am. Hi, ma'am. It's Kritika here. I am currently doing my second year in clinical psychology in Christ. And I really wanted to ask about how the field of psychology and clinical psychology is in India or in the US. Of course, you might not know much about it, but how much ever you could help me with.
Yeah, clinical psychology is extremely competitive, just like in India. It's extremely competitive here. I think it's a 6-year program as opposed to like the traditional 5-year PhDs because it's still a PhD, but you have like the 1 year of like clinical internship experience that you have to get. If you are thinking about pursuing a PhD in clinical psych, I would highly recommend applying for master's programs first and trying to get research experience from day zero of your program. So the research culture here is you can join a lab as a research assistant. You will be on like working on some very small projects. For example, like I had about 10 RAs on my PhD dissertation that I trained and I would mentor and I would monitor and supervise, right? So you can get those kind of positions, which will give you an insight into how research is conducted, how you can get funding, grants, all of that stuff. And I think that will strengthen your application to go into a PhD program. And PhD in clinical psych is the most competitive one of all the types of psychology. I think there's also another type of program called a PsyD, Doctor of Psychology.
Yeah, I'm planning to do that.
PhDs. PsyD
Yes.
is even more tricky because it's not funded very often. So psychology PhD gives you, like, I had a full ride, meaning I had a full scholarship for my tuition and I was paid a stipend. Many of the psych PhDs are like that, and that's the reason many people pursue a psych PhD versus a PsyD. PsyDs are not as frequently funded as PhDs, and I think the ultimate destination that you'll land is actually not very different between the two, right? A PsyD gives you the clinical accreditation immediately, but you have to apply and get the clinical accreditation for the psych PhD. You have to double check all of this, whatever I'm saying, right?
Yeah,
Do
yeah.
your due diligence. But that is the reason that many people actually prefer a psych PhD. So if finances are a constraint, then I would strongly encourage you to think about sponsor scholarship opportunities, which are more frequent in some degrees versus a few others, right? So I think that's the
Mhm.
bigger thing to keep in mind as of right now.
I wanted to study because I wanted to practice and not get into the research field of it. But I was planning about a student loan, if that is possible. Yeah.
Yeah. I think this might apply to like a few more people. So I'll keep this short because I know like I think we have more
Yes, yes.
questions and I also have to wrap this. Um, I think I personally was not okay with taking a student loan because I didn't want to be under the pressure of repaying it. It's a very real pressure to have an EMI or like to have any kind of like repayment on your head, right? And it's so contingent on getting employed here. Otherwise, like your interest is accrued from the day you graduate, regardless of whether you have a job or not, right? So it's a lot of pressure. It works for many people. It's not some people's cup of tea. I was very strongly in the second category. So I waited around until I got a good scholarship and everything. So I was okay to be in that position. So I would strongly encourage everybody to think twice, thrice, five times if you're taking the route of like student loans, because jobs are becoming more and more hard to find, especially for immigrants. They're tightening visa rules and all of that stuff. So I would say think really hard if a student loan is something that's feasible, or if you want to take like a partial scholarship, partial loan route. In fact, if like there was somebody from my family who was asking me this, and I was like, no, don't even do it because it's just not worth it anymore. Like the market is not like what it was 5 years ago, not even like 5 years ago, right? It's so quickly evolving that I would strongly recommend everybody thinks twice and thrice if they have to move abroad on a very hefty student loan. I'll pause that monologue there. I know someone else had their hand up, but I couldn't really catch who that was.
I'm sorry, can I just ask one last question?
Yeah, go for it.
I am actually a citizen of the US. So do things change for me in that sense?
What?
If
Yeah,
anything
why?
different?
Why? Like
I'm
you have
sorry.
none of these things to worry about. None of these things to worry about. Yeah, don't worry
So,
about
but
all of the
is there a
immigration stuff. But
future better than India for clinical psychology? That's something I wanted to get a clear picture about.
I think that's a person preference, to be
Okay.
honest. Like, where do you want to serve? I think
Mhm.
definitely like in the research space, there's a lot more infrastructure, a lot more funding, a lot more availability of like very simple things like having a good lab space, having access to like good infrastructure, right? All of that is very common to all fields here compared to India. But I think it ultimately depends on where you want to serve, because each of these populations has their own like niche set of problems, and depends on like I think whichever specific subfield under clinical psych that you're interested in, that you would
Right.
have to do some more research on like where you'd want to serve. Yeah,
Okay. Thank you so much.
no problem. Any other questions?
We actually are on a time constraint, so we unfortunately won't be able to take any more questions. But if you guys do have, ma'am has shared her email, please you can use it. So with that, we wrap up. So thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing such insightful experiences and perspectives. Your journey and advice have certainly provided all of us with a deeper understanding to adapting new cultures while building successful professional careers. As we come to the end of today's session, it is my privilege to propose the vote of thanks. On behalf of Office of Alumni Engagement, Christ Deemed to be University, I extend our heartfelt gratitude once again to our speaker. And thank you so much. Your journey has been very much inspiring, and I believe that each and every person who has attended this session will have very valuable learnings that we can take forward from this. We express our sincere gratitude to Brigadier B.G. Jagdish, Director of Center for Placements, Career Guidance and Office of Alumni, and Dr. Rishikesh, sir, for their efforts and dedication towards the Global Connect series. A very special word of thanks to Dr. Fino Mary Jose, alumni mentor for the North American chapter, for ma'am's continued guidance and mentorship. A moment of acknowledgement to Ms. Ranju Matthew and Ms. Vinita Lalu, alumni coordinators, along with the entire Office of Alumni Engagement, the student volunteers, and especially the North American chapter team, whose meticulous planning and commitment has ensured this chapter. Finally, we extend our sincere thanks to all the students, alumni, and faculty who joined us today. Your active participation, thoughtful questions, and enthusiastic engagement truly made this session interactive and meaningful. Before we conclude, we are delighted to invite you to the next session of the Global Connect series webinar, the Middle East chapter, session 6, titled Personal Branding for Job Market. This session will feature Mr. Ankit Vare Kurian, Managing Director, a distinguished alumni of Christ University, and it will be held on the 15th of August 2026 at 4:30. We encourage all of you to join us for another enriching session to gain valuable insights into building a strong professional brand. With that, we formally conclude today's session. Thank you all once again for being a part of the Global Connect series. We wish you a pleasant evening and look forward to welcoming you to our future sessions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Take care.